Welcome to the 60 Plus podcast.
I'm Janet.
And I'm Joe. How are you, Janet?
I'm great.
You're great?
I am.
Okay. That's
And
good.
I'm not going to say it like Tony Tiger. But yeah. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Doing well. I'm anxious for spring.
Yeah, I know. Well, we got a little taste of it this weekend. It felt pretty good.
I was out walking the beach on Friday and it was fantastic. And then Saturday I was at a friend's house and there was snow on the
I
ground.
know. I keep on saying the weather's like bipolar.
Polar might be right.
Yeah. But
what are we
yeah, it'll get there.
What are we talking about this
We
week,
have
Janet?
a real talk
know,
episode.
it's
We
great.
have a guest.
Okay, so do you want to introduce him?
Yes, his name is Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Great. I like Mike already.
Why?
He said I'm doing well.
Oh God, not that again. He's like
it's
a
kind-
real bugaboo about
Oh,
that.
really?
kind of a stickler.
And
People say I'm
and I
good.
try not to say it correctly just to get under his skin.
And it does every
Wow. Well,
time.
the standard has been set. Good to know.
All right. So, Janet, you want to lead off?
Sure.
We explain what our Real Talk episode is?
Yes, we're going to ask you 10 questions about being 60 plus. And that's it. All you need to know.
Okay, let's
So
do
here
it.
we go.
Yep.
So first question, how do you feel about being 60 plus?
I don't really think a lot about it.
Okay.
Good for you.
I'm a very optimistic person. I tend to enjoy each day and take it that way.
All right. Well, that's a great answer. I like it. Joe, that's it.
All right. So, that is
All
right.
I can wax poetic. Are these yes, no questions?
No. Talk as long as you
Okay.
want.
Don't worry. You'll
Good
have
to
a
know.
chance to
Yeah.
expound.
All right.
Okay.
Well, just to kind of elaborate on Janet's question, you don't think about it, but when you were approaching 60, did you say, ooh, boy, that's a big one coming up?
Well, I think I have very personal circumstances. My birthday is Christmas, so it tends to be overshadowed and always has been overshadowed by the
Oh.
holiday. I do think I think less about birthdays than most people.
Right.
I can remember turning 60, and I think it's something, of course, you note, but I don't remember it as being any particular import or attached to a lot of emotion.
Okay. Good. I like it.
I
All
do
right.
too.
Question 2.
All right. Complete this sentence. You know you're 60 plus when.
You're on a podcast with that name? That's kind of obvious.
That might be the
Very
best
Yeah.
answer we've had to that
He's
question.
quick.
That's
All right. Can you
Yeah.
come up with something else, though?
No, that's okay.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think it's probably a bit of a balance. One part of the balance, of course, is there's a maturity and an appreciation for life that you should really have and enjoy. The flip side, of course, is that your resources are different. I've had a lot of experience being outdoors, and when I was younger, I could put myself into all kinds of circumstances and always had a way out. I think as I got a little older, and certainly as I've approached 60, I've had this conversation explicitly. I have an appreciation that the resources aren't the same.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be a little more thought and consideration about consequence and risk.
Yeah.
But it can't be overwhelming. It just needs to be
Managed.
Perfect word. Thank you.
Yeah.
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 So when it's our birthdays, we do a Real Talk episode with each other.
Oh, nice.
So we just did one recently, a couple of weeks ago for my birthday. And I talked about when I was younger, riding motorcycles with a friend. And we rode over this railroad trestle bridge and
Yeah.
above a river. I would never in a million years do
Yeah.
that now.
Yeah. I think there's you have a better sense of risk and resources as well. And I think that it's some part of it's physical resources, but a large part of it's mental resources.
Mhm.
I've always been on the water over the course of my life and put myself in some really stupid circumstances, but largely had the wherewithal to figure things out. And that's what I have an appreciation for. It would be a lot more difficult. So as a result, don't put yourself there to begin
Right.
with.
Right. Yeah. No, smart. So question 3, in your 60s, have you done or tried anything new?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. Really, the chief thing that I've started in my 60s is I started wing foiling. And let me explain a bit.
Mhm.
So I have, as I mentioned, a water background. I've surfed for 50 years. And I windsurfed for 40 years,
Mhm.
really since windsurfing started. And over the course of those years, I was very devoted, surfed and windsurfed lots of places, had a lot of attention to it. It's like everything in life. There are periods where you do more and periods where you do less, but it's always been a constant,
Mhm.
those activities. And roughly 2 years ago, I ran into somebody who had a foil board and started to talk with him and suddenly realized, I'm going to do that. So what does that mean? What is foiling? So foil is really something you see now on boats. You see them
Okay.
on windsurfers. You see them in lots of aquatic craft. The foil itself is a wing that's under the water.
Okay.
And what it does is as it moves like a wing, it creates lift and lifts the craft. My pursuit, wing foiling, uses a foil. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a wing under the water that's then attached to a relatively small board
Mm-hmm.
through a mast. The standard mast is 3 feet. They can be longer. And then what you do is you get in the water, the board's on the water surface, and you have a wing, which is similar to a sail. But the difference is you hold it in your hands. It has either handles or it can have a bar called a boom.
Mm-hmm.
And what that allows you to do is to actually use that sail and have it in your hands and then control and create power with the wing. And that power then creates lift. So what happens is you start off, you get on the board, you're on your knees, you sort of get the wind in the wing, and then you stand up on this little creaky little board. And as you gain more speed, the foil engages and creates
The
lift.
foil that's in the water.
It's in the water,
Mhm.
yeah, engages, and then the next thing you know, you're above the water.
Wow.
So thereafter, you're flying above the water, it's roughly 3 feet above the water, and it's largely frictionless.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the foil itself is in the right position, there's very little drag. So when you first do it, it's much akin to, I guess, probably people have compared it most to like powder skiing.
Okay.
There's a weightlessness that attaches to it. But having said that, when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And when you first try it, you think, well, how hard can it be? And
And then
you know the answer. And having a heavy windsurfing background, and so being familiar with sails and having a sailing background as a kid, etc., you have some leg up. But the truth is that you're really starting anew, and there's a lot to learn and a lot to master. And what you then appreciate too, at any age, is that it's kind of an infinite curve in
Mhm.
terms of the things that you can learn and how you can refine and get better and better. So it's very compelling that way. And again, I've done it for just over a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. That's great.
What else can I tell you about
And
it?
you
Though?
do it all year long.
Yes, yeah. Well, so stay on the water all year round with
Mhm.
surfing and with foiling as well. I mean, the big difference is that the gear is so much better now.
Mhm.
20 years ago, you'd go surfing in a bad suit and you'd come home and you would literally shiver for 35 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, shiver hard because you were cold. Now the gear is so much more comfortable.
Okay.
So
So you only shiver for 15 minutes.
no, truthfully, sometimes it's amazing. It can be freezing cold out. I always say the same thing: is once you put the hood on, it's July. I mean, once you put the hood on your
Yep.
suit, you're in your suit, it's warm and it's comfortable, and you stay that
Is
way.
it a dry suit?
No, it's a good question. Dry suits are really very uncommon now. Back in the day, people wore them. We call them baggies. They're still around. And the difference is that they have seals at your wrists and seals at your ankles, and they're dry. They're also lined, so you can wear your street clothes in a dry suit.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that it's very limiting in terms of mobility.
Okay.
And also, weirdly enough, you don't want to really use one if you're in the water, because the problem is that if it were to fill with water,
Oh.
you'd be in trouble.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they are wetsuits, but the seals are pretty tight. You don't get a lot of water in there. And the materials are fantastic. So between, having some nice days, a little bit of sun always helps, good gear and wind and some friends, why not go?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So you said it was less friction. Is that better on
Yeah.
the knees then?
Yeah. I mean, it's really akin to flying.
Yeah. That's
When you're
cool.
up there, there's no sound. The board itself feels very light. And, you're 3 feet above the water and just zipping along.
Right. And it tracks with the water. So if you're still riding the wave, right? You're just kind of above the wave. Is that
Well,
right?
you can, so that's a great question, which is you can be just zipping along in flat water
Mhm.
and go for a long stretch and just enjoy that. Or you can go out into waves, and then when you're going into a wave, you're going to be powered up with the wing. And then when you're going into the wave itself, you have to get the wave to engage the board, which is
Okay.
fairly tricky.
Yeah, that sounds
It's
tricky.
easier in a surfboard
Right.
because there's so little of it in the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. But, that's an example of what I was talking about in terms of this sort of infinite curve, like the number of things you can learn. And I think this is true of surfing as well, which is even after having surfed for a very long time, every time's a little different.
Yeah.
There's always something to discover. There's always something to enjoy.
Yeah, which is great too, because we always talk about like lifelong learning, and just staying fresh and, engaging the brain is such an important part of aging
It's
gracefully.
huge. It's
Hmm.
huge. And mastery is an important part, right? And mastery is sort of is an aspiration. It's not an arrival or an end point. And that's very important to have that. And also challenge.
Hmm.
The challenge is good. And also, the sort of the feedback you get from even an incremental improvement is incredibly important. One of the things I think you have an appreciation for at a certain point in your life is, do you look at the gain or do you look at the gap?
Hmm.
And if you tend to look at the gain, each day you go out, you've done something a little differently, perhaps a little better, perhaps not, but you see it as a gain versus when you're younger. And this is why people oftentimes don't start things. And this is true at any age. They see the gap.
Yeah.
They see that, I wasn't that good. Well, of course you're not that good. You're just starting.
Right.
And we have a phrase, which is, I think, very important, which is called embrace the suck,
Oh, sure.
which is when you're learning something,
Yeah.
embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Like really enjoy the process of learning and appreciate that you're not going to be good, but also appreciate, and this is the benefit of being a bit older too, appreciate that no one really cares.
Yeah. That's true, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We
someone
worry.
cares.
Yeah.
And it's the person who's looking at the gap and not the gain.
Yeah.
Truly. Yeah. That's a great point. I think that's an incredibly important point. And that's a choice and that requires a reorientation.
Sure.
Some people don't have. Mastering new things is an opportunity to have a new orientation, have a new approach, to
Mhm.
really think about, I'm just going to do this and enjoy it. I'm not going to worry about how I look or how I feel. I'm really going to embrace the suck, draw the positive out of it.
Right.
And I think that's true. I mean, we talk about wing foiling, and people can see that and go, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" But it's true; it could be anything.
Right.
I think that's most important. This is like a mental model for doing new things at any age, but especially now, because if not now, when?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's
Time
always
is of
true.
the essence.
That's always true, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we all knew that when we were 12 years old.
Right, yeah.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
All right. Looking back on your 60 plus years, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think the thing I'm proudest of is I'm proud of my daughters. They're great people. I'm proud of my friends. I'm proud of my positive attitude. I'm
Mm-hmm.
proud of still showing up and doing things
Mm-hmm.
and doing it hard when I can.
Right.
I guess that's it.
That's
Okay.
good. I like it. Okay. So, what is your biggest challenge at 60 plus?
That's a good question. I think probably the only challenge I can see, and it's easily manageable, is your energy profile certainly changes.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you have to think more about recovery and think more about taking care of yourself, because it's not going to be the same at 60 as it is at 40, or God forbid at 20.
Right.
But it's just a variable that's managed.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else, so, and I feel like that's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mhm.
manageable. And,
My problem is I'm still in denial. So,
Really?
sometimes I say that about myself, and you have to manage that energy level. But I just had a conversation with one of my daughters, and she's considering taking on a new challenge. And I said, do it now when
Yeah.
you have the energy.
right. Yeah.
You can do it. And I'm going to talk to her about the gap and the gain, because she's looking at the gap.
Yeah.
She's saying this new challenge is going to take a lot of my time. It's going to be a challenge over a period of years, and I don't know if I can do it. And it's,
Yeah.
yes, you can.
Yeah.
I know you can.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
I did something very similar, but she doesn't see that yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's common. I mean, what's interesting is everybody would be a gazillionaire if only they, they can always see the end state.
Hmm.
They can see themselves as being a huge success, but the problem is they can't see where to start, and they don't have that first step vision.
Right.
And the fallacy is they think there is a first step. It's like there's any step, just get started.
Just take a step.
a
Take a
step, yeah.
step, just
Mhm.
get started. And I think that, whether it's school or the society at large, I don't know, but it tends to say there's a way to do things. And as a result, if that way seems inscrutable, I'm not quite sure what the way is, people then choose not to at all, as
Mhm.
opposed to just start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true. And you can look at, stories of great athletes or great performers of any sort. And oftentimes a common thread is that they just started somewhere. They started in a very homely fashion or a very haphazard or ad hoc fashion, but they found like a passion.
Hmm.
The first time I went out on a wingfoil board, it wasn't on a wingfoil board. It was with a wing, but it was on a stand-up paddle board.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time I went out, I said to myself, I'm going to do this the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It just made sense to me.
Hmm.
And I had no idea how I was going to do it. And the truth is I wasted time, if you could call it that. I was having fun, but I wasn't learning much in the beginning because I didn't have anybody to learn from and with.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another big part at 60 or any age. I was fortunate to then meet some friends who were also in similar positions, some a little better, some at the same starting point. And we were all able to learn together.
Right.
And to sort of pull each other along. And so that's the other benefit of all this, which is that community that you then create.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of it is through learning and part of it is through commitment. Like we just keep showing up and maybe we're not learning much on one day, but we're having fun. The community is very animating and very powerful part of it. And I think that, again, you can get that from any activity
Mm-hmm.
and probably now more than ever. Because, the obvious manifestations of community are harder and harder to find as you get older. When you're young, you can be a Boy Scout. When you're 60, I don't think you can.
It's not advisable.
Yeah, probably not advisable.
Well, you can find your local wingboard, wingfoil group. And
Yeah.
longtime listeners know Janet and I met playing pickleball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a community that's still there.
And
And
when
we're
you
still learning.
Mhm.
and when you get started, it's funny how people then you find one another, don't you?
Mhm.
It's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 6. What's your biggest delight at 60 plus?
Oh, every day. I mean, I don't see a biggest delight. It's all good. And I think it goes back to still being able to do things that are important to me and do them with friends and still stay active and still stay engaged. Maybe the activity profile would change over time. I'm sure it will, because that's what nature does. But the sense of commitment and activity and interest will never go away. So that's the delight, is still maintaining those things and keeping them going.
But it is a decision to do that. Some people they hit an age and they go, I'm done.
They do. They do.
And it's a little sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's, I don't understand why. Maybe, again, some things just seem intimidating and inscrutable. I'm not sure when or how or with whom, or overwhelming or daunting. Like that would be too much. But again, that goes back to calibrations. Like, what are your expectations? When you say it's going to be too much, is it because the event's too much or the activity's too much or because you're expecting too much?
Mm-hmm.
My opinion is they've got a preconceived notion in their mind and
Yeah.
they say, I've reached that point in my life when I can't do these things anymore.
I know. I think that's exactly right. And the alternative would be to do them differently. Like I remember years ago, I used to surf at this one spot and there was this group of older gentlemen. There were probably 4 or 5 of them. And they would be out on the summer's day. Sometimes,
Older, define older.
they're in their 60s and 70s
Mhm,
easily, and
okay.
maybe even late 70s, some of them. And they were classic in that they would always be there and they would paddle out, and they all had classic longboards, and they'd paddle out and they would take like one wave. It was a good ride. I mean, they were good surfers.
Right.
And then they would go back in and they would sit in their chairs at the beach and watch all the other surfers and talk about the other surfers and talk about life or whatever they talked about. But it was so great. I mean, I don't think they felt like they had a quota that they
Right.
needed it to be 5 waves.
Right.
I mean, they would literally go out and do one great wave, and then you'd see them go in and spend the rest of the afternoon having a good time. And yet I consider them as much part of the surfing community as the rad 20-year-old,
Mhm.
out there ripping it for 4 hours.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's all
Interesting.
relative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mhm. That's cool. Okay. So, what 60 plus person do you admire the most?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I can't think of anybody that I admire. Isn't that awful?
No, I think you kind of said it too earlier, which was like you admire your daughters, your friends, the
Yeah.
people around you, and yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think of it as admiration. Like admiration, there's a distance
Mm-hmm.
and there's a dynamic of almost like them versus you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
distance or space that
Yeah.
suggests that you look at them and you look at them differently.
Right.
I would just look at it more, and there's a lot of people I like.
Okay, good.
Yeah, how's that?
Okay.
That works.
Yeah,
All right. So we like to bust myths here on the 60 Plus podcast. We've talked about, can 60 plus people adopt technology? Can they start wind foiling?
yeah.
All of those things. What's a myth that you would like us to bust?
And that's a great question again. I think it's probably anything to do with sort of physical limitations. I mean, we have them. Emphasis on the limitation part. I think that the myth should be that somehow you're limited
Mm-hmm.
when you're not. Because the truth is, again, you may not be out there for 4 hours like those young surfers. You might be out there for one wave, but they're still out there.
Right.
They're not being held back by some sort of physical or mental limit. And I think that more than anything, if we could dispel the notion of limitations and understand the inherent inner choice that limitations represent,
Mm-hmm.
we'd all be better off.
Yeah. I mean, you can still climb the mountain. It just might take you a little longer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe in pieces, maybe you go a little bit here and a little bit there. It's
Or it might be a smaller mountain.
absolutely,
There's nothing wrong with that.
and you're just going to do it differently,
Right.
but as long as you're doing, my hope is that, I don't know with wing foiling, how long, hopefully a very long time. But I've always envisioned that surfing would be the last thing to go.
Right.
Because if I can still float on a board, I'm going to be surfing. And somebody might say, you didn't do anything. Well, that's what you think. I was out there, man. If I still own a wetsuit when I'm 80 something years old, I'll be happy. If I don't, I'll be disappointed in myself.
Might be harder to put the wetsuit on, though.
It's a pain now. Yeah, that's a dark
Or
secret.
maybe you'll just live in it.
Reach
Yeah.
reaching back.
Probably.
Got it on
Yeah.
and I'm not taking it off.
Well, there are times when you get a new suit. Sometimes they're very difficult to get off, so that could be a real problem at 81.
Reaching back to get that zipper gets a little tougher and tougher.
Yeah. Well, you walk along the beach and find somebody who's willing to do it for you. It
You
can,
get the zipper now. And you get it
it can be a long, lonely walk. So, will you help me, please?
Okay. Am I up?
You are.
Yes. What advice would you give to someone who is about to turn 60?
Oh gosh, I think it would just encapsulate everything I've said to this point, which is, don't think about it as 60. Just think about it as another day, another positive day, and think about what you're going to do with that day. Think about what you're going to do and how you're going to change yourself, what you're going to learn, what you're going to do that's new, what you're going to do that's fun, how much fun are you going to have when you're in your 60s, what kind of goals are you going to set. And it could be professional goals. I mean, it could be any sort, but make sure you have some fun goals as well.
Yeah.
And then, fight the limitations, fight the tide to make sure that you continue to pursue the things that make you feel alive.
Mm-hmm. Like it. Nice.
You had to get tied in there.
Always.
You're the water guy.
Just the way we think.
All right, last question.
Yeah.
Do you have a bucket list? And if so, what's on it?
I don't have a bucket list. And this is funny because I have friends who, quite dear and they're quite directed in things. They have, really clear thoughts about things that are important and they want to do X and they want to do Y. And I think that's fantastic. I don't have that. I just want to continue to do interesting things.
Well, 5 years ago, you probably never said, I want to go wing foiling.
Didn't know what it was.
But when you started doing it,
Yeah.
you in effect checked off a bucket list item that you didn't know you had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the better way of looking at it, right? Which is, who knows what's on the list because it's going to continually emerge. Like you're going to see things and you're going to go, oh, I want to do that. I want to try that. And it's not static. That was an interesting thought. It's not static. It's much more situational or much more driven by this sort of discovery.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of you're not checking things off the bucket list. You're putting things in the bucket.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. I mean, accumulating experiences. And what's important too is we tend to think of experiences in a very grand sense. Like I'll go see the Great Wall of China. But the truth is that you can go to the same beach with the same board and each day, and same wing, same gear, and each day can be a completely different experience.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how you define experience.
Mm-hmm.
Is it that macro scale or is it this much more of a micro and personal scale? For me, it tends to be more of a personal scale.
It was easier to get the wetsuit off today than it was
Absolutely.
yesterday.
Yeah, that's a victory. Exactly. I'm not sleeping in it. So
All right. I think that's it.
Great. You passed.
Oh, well, congratulations to me, I guess. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Wow.
you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks. Great questions as well.
Yeah, no, great answers.
Great answers.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
we loved having you.
Okay. And
Pleasure.
that's it for this week's episode of the 16 Plus podcast.
I'm Janet.
And I'm Joe.
Bye.